All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. It's officially 6:30. So if you have not signed in yet, please go ahead and do that. There is a table right over here by the food with Teresa from Parenting Matters. There is a sign-in sheet for her, and there's also a sign-in sheet for the Florida Center. Please do both because we need that recorded for Bridge of Life, and then we also need it recorded for the Florida Center. Okay, so just a couple announcements before we get started. So I wanted to remind everybody that we do have parent coaching available through Chosen. So if that is something that you guys are interested in, you can reach out to me. I'll go ahead and send this in an email today as well. But that is one-on-one coaching with the grown-ups in your home for anything going on at home. So if that's something you guys want, it's a service we provide with Chosen. Some upcoming events, really exciting. So the Superhero 5K. Who's been to the Superhero 5K? Raise your hand. Okay. So that is on February 8th. We have a promo for 50% off for our families. I'm going to send that code out today as well, so you'll have that in your email. And let's see here. Okay. Just going through upcoming gatherings. So it's December, just in case you guys didn't realize. It's officially December. The year is almost over. Next year in 2025, our gatherings are going to be at a couple different locations. We're finalizing them, but we're going to be in Sarasota, University area at Grace Church, and then we're also finalizing our South County location right now for the first few months of the year, and those will be announced soon. But just keep that in mind as you're planning. And that is it. So tonight we have the Florida Center coming in today to talk to all of us. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to them, and then we'll get started. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. How is everybody doing tonight? All right. So we're going to get started. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay. So the slide after this is just going to do some introductions. But first, I just want to start with the Florida Center and just the array of services that we offer. We have the Starfish Academy, which is our daycare. We have one in Northport and then one in Sarasota. We also offer developmental therapies, our speech therapy, our occupational therapy. We have early childhood mental health, healthy families, early childhood court, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder services, which is what we're predominantly going to be talking about tonight. And then we have the school-based mental health and our Florida Center Training Institute. One of our last slides will cover some of our other trainings through the Florida Center Training Institute. There's a lot of really, really good ones upcoming. So I just encourage all of you guys to check those out. Many of them are free or super cheap. And if financial stuff is ever an issue, you can always reach out to them as well. And they're always willing to give any assistance. And I know there is a discount code that will be on the slide as well for anyone that's in attendance tonight. All right, so that's me. So I am Krista Harmon. I am a licensed mental health therapist, and I am the manager of our fetal alcohol spectrum disorder services in Sarasota. So I kind of oversee the clinic in Sarasota. I supervise our clinician there. I supervise intake. And so, just a little bit about me. I am born and raised Sarasota. I have 2 kids. I've worked a lot with the criminal justice systems and especially with child welfare. So foster families, early childhood court families, they are really just my heart. And I love this role because I get to work a lot with child welfare. And then I'm going to turn it over to Pam. It's on.
It's on?
It is.
It's on. Hey there. Hi, I'm Pam Carver. I am the intake coordinator for the FASD clinic, and I am an adoptive mom. My son, Alex, is 20, and he's from Russia, and he has FAS, so fetal alcohol syndrome, which you will find out more about. And that's it for now. So the microphone really makes this very intimidating.
It really does.
Yeah.
All right, and apparently we really wanted you to know our services, so there they are again. Okay, so just some housekeeping items, and bear with us with the microphones. We're not really used to using them, so it's just a little bit weird. So if at any point you can't hear us or we're too loud, just let us know. We do want to make this as interactive as possible, so there are some different activities we're going to do throughout the presentation. We also encourage any questions. So please stop us at any time, raise your hands, give a hoot, holler, whatever you want to do. Feel free to ask, or if you don't feel comfortable asking right now, you can also always email us. Some additional housekeeping items. If you need to move around, please move around. I know for me, I've been up since 5 a.m. I'm kind of wearing down a little bit. I'm sure many of you are as well. So if you need to stretch, if you need to use the potty, any of those things, please do. Just do what your body needs. All right, here's some of the things to expect today. We are going to talk some about just the definition and prevalence of FASD. Obviously, we are with FASD services. We are going to be focusing a lot, though, just on brain-based in general. So although you're going to hear us talking about FASD, I want to be clear that a lot of what we're going to be talking about is just really focusing on the brain. And my overall goal for you guys is to really begin looking at behaviors and those types of things from a brain-based perspective versus from a behavioral perspective. We're going to talk some about just the impact of alcohol and drugs on the brain. We are not medical doctors, so I always like to be really, really clear on that. If you start asking really involved questions about medical stuff, we are probably not your girls, but we will do our very best to answer any questions. We're going to talk about primary and secondary symptoms, and then we're going to talk about accommodations.
Am I back on?
You are.
Okay. Could we just take a quick minute, though? How many of you have a foster child in your home right now? Okay. How many of you have an adopted child in your home? Okay. How many of you have more than one child at home? Okay. Any biological kids out there? Wow. Okay. That just helps me. And then does the term FASD or FAS, is that familiar to any of you? Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
And again, that's also some of the reason for the beginning part, we're just going to cover very basic information. We try not to come into it with the assumption that everyone is familiar with FASD, but we do have a little bit of an assumption, especially when we're working with foster families and adoptive families. You guys have had tons of trainings and oftentimes have had FASD trainings 10 and 11 times by the time I'm seeing you. So again, if you have more questions as we're going through it, please don't hesitate to stop us. We already did that, so look at that. We're ahead of the game.
Sorry, anxiety.
All right, so this is just a brief overview of what FASD means. So the F stands for fetal, so obviously any sort of changes in the normal development in utero. Alcohol, of course, is a teratogen, and it causes cell changes and damage. Spectrum, damage difficulties present from mild to severe. Same as autism. So, we have FAS that's on the very severe side, and then we have what used to be called fetal alcohol effects. Now it's called neurodevelopmental disorder on the other side. So anytime there's alcohol exposure, an individual can fall anywhere on that spectrum. And then, of course, disorders is anytime there's an inability to function and adapt is expected across the lifespan. Okay, here's just some facts that I always like to share with people. Again, many of you are already going to be aware of these, but FASD is almost twice as common as autism, 8 times more common than Tourette's syndrome, 17 times more common than cerebral palsy, and 35 times more common than Down syndrome. I will say though, unfortunately for all of these various disorders up here, especially autism, there's a lot more services and supports for autism than there are for FASD. All right. This was a study that was done that looked at first grade students in 4 different U.S. communities. And this actually identified that 1 in 20 school-aged children have an FASD. I will actually say in all my various interactions with kids and in the classrooms that this is actually probably on the lower end. Because again, with alcohol, it's really hard to know sometimes if a mom drank while she was pregnant. Moms aren't as likely to be positive at delivery. They're not as likely to admit to alcohol use. There's lots of different factors that play into that, but it's estimated that 1 in 20 students will have an FASD. Yeah. Pam, do you know the ins and outs of this study? Here you go.
So obviously you can't self-identify as a first grader, right? And then they're not asking the parents, I'm guessing, and then you can't test for it. So how are they what is the criteria to identify? Is it are they seeing a psychotherapist? Like how do they identify?
So that's a really good question. And that's where it gets really tricky. The problem, so I like to say alcoholism, not that all kids have alcoholism, but we know that alcoholism is a cunning, baffling, and powerful disease. And so I just think like that effect of the alcohol use also is cunning, baffling, and powerful. So for kids to test and be diagnosed, most places require to have known or confirmed exposure to alcohol in utero. Yes. 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 Yeah.
And thank you for clarifying that. Sometimes, especially when we're up here, right, and when we think of brain, even for us and our brains, we talk in front of people pretty regularly, but it doesn't change that you still get anxious, you still, right? So when we're feeling anxious, then when you're saying something, my brain kind of goes to, oh snap, I wasn't ready so soon for a question. Okay, so I am not going to read this to all of you. The next few slides are actually pretty lengthy, but I did want to include them for you just because there's oftentimes, even within our clinic, we oftentimes get a lot of kiddos that have come to us that have already been diagnosed with autism or it's suspected. So the next few slides in the PowerPoint really cover some of the similarities between autism spectrum disorders and fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. And as you can see, here are some of the key differences. So again, I just wanted to make sure that you guys had these. Have any of you in here had foster kiddos, biological kiddos, adoptive kiddos who have been diagnosed with autism? Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. I would just like to say that the component that usually gets overlapped is the sensory component, or even OCD. So when my son was first diagnosed, I didn't want it to be FAS. I didn't want that to be this lifelong, like if you do the Google search, it's very disheartening. It's not very hopeful. Especially 20 years ago it wasn't. So I didn't want that, and I wasn't sure what it was either. Like I didn't want to accept it And I was able to find a doctor who was like, oh, no, that's not that. That's Asperger's. And it's because that sensory component, which we'll talk more about later, but there are definitely overlaps. And then one of the key features of differences is children with FASD really want to connect, and they're very social. And then children with autism usually don't want to connect. And that's kind of one of the main key differences.
Absolutely. And again, we included lots of other ones on that, but just wanted to make sure that you guys had it for reference.
Okay.
Did you have a question?
You say it. It's okay. Mm-hmm. That's a really good point, and that's why when he was asking the question before, I'm like, oh no, not the, not that. But to diagnose these children with an FASD, we really do need to know if they were exposed to alcohol, and it's hard to find. And especially I think it's hard to find, it's hard to prove, and so then that's what we do. She was saying she couldn't prove that, so she's got a similar diagnosis of autism, but not the FASD. So, but they're so similar that does happen often.
All right, so we wanted to cover some on FASD and child welfare. Obviously, all of you have in some form or another, at some point or another, been involved with child welfare. The prevalence of FASD in the child welfare system is pretty shocking. It's estimated that 70% of the children in foster care are affected by prenatal alcohol exposure. So very, very high numbers. Children from substance abusing households are more likely to spend longer periods of time in foster care than other children. And a study of children in foster care showed over 80% of children with FASDs were missed at entry. And again, a lot of the challenges, moms aren't testing positive at delivery, right? They may be testing positive for opiates, marijuana, a whole slew of other things. They're not testing positive for alcohol. Oftentimes, I have found in my work that they may not even be as concerned about the alcohol when mom's testing positive for heroin, so they're not necessarily even asking the questions. And so we're missing a lot of that. And oftentimes, they may even be diagnosed with NAS initially, so neonatal abstinence syndrome. They may have initially issues, then they get a little bit better, and then come 5+ years old, then we start having really, really big behaviors. All right, here's some additional information on FASD and child welfare. As I already indicated, it's not typically identified at birth. Developmental milestones may be typical, yet executive function is impaired. Identification was highly reliant on hospital screening, which again is pretty inconsistent. I'm finding oftentimes they're not asking, or if biomom says, I didn't drink, they just say, okay, and they just move on from it. Thus, focus in child welfare systems is primarily on newborns and infants, leading to missed opportunities to identify prenatal alcohol-exposed individuals and FASDs. Currently, Minnesota is actually the only state with an FASD screening process for children entering care. Now, I will say in our state, obviously, kiddos are having a CBHA done. It's mandated that they have that at within a certain amount of time. However, oftentimes alcohol exposure is unknown. Is anyone in here? I know one person had indicated that they have kiddos with an FASD, but anyone else in here, was there known alcohol exposure with your kiddos? Okay. And was it known because biomom indicated use, or did the baby test positive? How was it known? Okay. Okay. Any of you, maybe it's not known but highly suspected? Okay. And again, I always like to be clear, just because someone was doing drugs, it does not always mean they were drinking. I've known many people in my professional life that were heavy, heavy drug users and did not like alcohol at all, right? So it is important that we don't ever assume. However, I think it's also important that we 9 times out of 10 assume that there probably was some alcohol use going on. I always like to say, too, that it's not just heavy drug users that we're looking at. There can be moms that maybe didn't know they were pregnant. Most women don't even find out they're pregnant until 8 or more weeks. And if they're just out socially drinking or whatever, that obviously could lead to the substance exposure. Here's just a slide covering just some different things that exposure to drugs can cause. And again, I'm not going to read these verbatim, but you guys can see that neonatal abstinence syndrome is definitely an issue. Preterm birth and birth complications, decreased growth, increased risk of growth restriction, preterm labor. There's lots of different issues that can be caused by drugs. So we don't ever want to downplay drugs. We know, obviously, drugs absolutely impact the developing baby. What research has shown, though, is that out of all of the various substances that someone could be using while pregnant, that alcohol has the longest term effects on the child. And there we go. Look at that. What a perfect segue. There it even says. Yep. So of all the substance of abuse, including cocaine, heroin, and marijuana, alcohol produces by far the most serious neurobehavioral effects in the fetus. When you look at what's developing throughout the lifespan of the baby, the brain is one of the things that is developing throughout the pregnancy. There's certain things like the eye or the limbs or, different parts of the developing baby that maybe they happen at 2 weeks, or maybe they happen at 8 weeks, and then that's kind of it for that time period. But the brain develops throughout it. More recent research is indicating that fentanyl may actually be right up there with alcohol as far as more long-term effects. But again, that research is newer. Okay, so some additional risk factors, and I know Pam may chime in on some of this as well, but the amount and pattern of alcohol use obviously does play a part. Was drinking just occurring in the very beginning? Was it occurring throughout the pregnancy? That definitely does play a part. Nutrition. So the reality is, was mom eating well? Was mom taking vitamins? No prenatal care. That's definitely a major thing that can affect a developing baby. Polysubstance use, genetics, trauma, stressful pregnancy. We like to capture all of these because although in our clinic we are looking specifically at an FASD, the reality is all of these things affect the developing baby. All of these things, trauma for instance, can absolutely affect the developing brain.
I was thinking about that previous slide. So my son was abandoned at the hospital and stayed at the hospital for 2 months and then went to the orphanage. And, maybe there are some children that have come through your home that were also taken right at birth. Usually the foster children stay with their mom for a little bit and have that connection but even young babies, research shows that they know there's something wrong. They can feel that abandonment even when they're very young. And so that's why when we look at this, in clinic we're talking about alcohol, the effects of alcohol, but in your life when you're working with these kids, is it trauma? Is it ADHD? Is it attachment? It could be all of those things all at once, and it's really hard to tease out what is exactly going on.
How many of you have all of that going on? How many of you have kiddos that there was substance exposure, also trauma, possibly multiple placements right before they even came to you? Maybe bio parents had a whole slew of learning challenges, mental health issues, right? So by the time they come to you, like Pam said, it can be really, really hard to know what letters of the alphabet are we dealing with. Is this FASD? Is this ASD? Is this ADHD? Is this OCD, ODD, RAD, right? All the different letters of the alphabet. And sometimes it can be a lot of them. Okay, so different source, similar symptoms. Again, all of these different things, whether it was alcohol, whether it was drugs, tobacco, genetics, illness, trauma, they all affect the brain and how the brain functions. Okay, and for many of your kiddos, unfortunately, they may very well have every single one of these, and so their brain may not be functioning like someone's brain that didn't have all of this. All right, so let's think about our brains. All right, so what I want you guys to do, and you can do it on the back of your PowerPoint slides, you can do it on any of number of your pieces of paper that you have. I would like you guys to write down the steps it took your brain from the time your children got home until you arrived here tonight. And some of you may be saying, I'm not going to write this down. I'm just going to think about it, and that's fine. But truly, just try to think about all the different things that your brain had to do. And I'll give you guys a minute or two, and then we're going to... Okay, so for someone that said it's a short list, what was your list? Well, but let's face it, right? If we really want to think about the brain, I-75 alone is going to take a lot of different things with the brain. Right? So although it may seem like, well, we just had to get in the car and we just had to drive here, we may actually had to avoid saying unkind things to someone as they cut in front of us. We may had to slam on the brakes. We may had to, we had to put our turn signal on. We had to wait in the really long line to get off of I-75 onto 64, right? So even when we look at that, there was lots of things that were involved just to get on I-75 and get here. What about for some of the rest of you? What was involved to get here? Yes, helping someone else with homework, right? Sometimes having to teach ourselves how to do the homework again because we don't remember it. All right. Again, though, my biggest encouragement, and we're going to be doing little activities like this throughout the night, is just really getting everyone to think about how involved our brain is in everything that we do, and then being able to apply that to our kiddos and how involved their brains are in everything that they do. And oftentimes what we may be asking their little brains to do, and are their brains capable of doing those things?
So I'd like to jump in here.
Yes.
I was thinking of my son when he was in preschool. I had the occupational therapist help me make a little picture chart of how to get him out of the car. And when you're working with picture charts, that's when you really see how much your brain is doing. So like to get him out of the car, we had to stop the car. We had to undo the seatbelt. We had to open the door, grab his backpack, go inside. So our brains are doing a lot more than we realize, and our kids' brains are probably doing way more than definitely my brain would have done at the same age. Because there's technology everywhere. There's just things everywhere. There's all that input from the visual and the sounds and the sights. So
Thank you, Pam.
you're welcome.
And this is Pam.
Okay, so I'm going to go off script here. Our next slide talks about strengths of individuals with FASD/NB. And I'm going to go off script.
We love that. They appreciate that too. Let's mix it up a little bit.
Yeah. Like,
Oh, he has a question, Pam. You ready for him?
oh, well, yeah, let's do that first.
Neurobehavioral.
All right. So, and I'm going to go to the podium. Okay. So, why do strengths matter with these children? So, just to be real, my son, I love him to death. And it has almost killed me. These can be very difficult children to raise. And so, why do these strengths matter? And so it's a balanced approach. We want to look at the strengths that the kids have, but we also really want to validate the struggles you're going through. You know, I'm not a person that owns a gun, but I really think I could have lost it if one more person would have said to me, "Oh, he's just a boy." Like, no, nothing is new to man, but no child has done all of these things as frequently as they're doing all of these things. They can be very hard children. So we have some strengths listed here. We're going to circle back to those. Jeff Noble is a guy out of Canada. Has anyone heard of Jeff Noble? The FASD Success Show. Jeff has a podcast. And if you're looking for resources for FASD, a lot of good stuff comes out of Canada. Canada is light years ahead of us on the research for this. So Jeff Noble, it's the FASD Success Show podcast. And I've been having such a hard time with my son lately that I've been listening to these podcasts almost daily because I need to fill my cup back up and learn to love this child in a different way in this season of our life. And so I came across episode 98. Episode 98 talks about, there's an organization called CAN FASD, Canada, so CAN, C-A-N, FASD. And the Family Advisory Committee did a study on the positive traits of kids with FAS or FASD. And so they found that individuals with FASD showed notable self-worth. They know who they are. And they're first humans, these little creatures that can just bug the daylights out of you or bite you or kick you or hit you. They are humans first, and they are experts on themselves. The study also found that individuals with FASD were frequently reported to be perseverant and able to overcome challenges. The short story is, what drives you crazy today will ensure their survival in the future. They are goal-directed, and this was one of the things in the podcast. The goal-directed behavior is maybe not the goals we want for the kids, but it is a goal. It's just their goal. So the kids also are receptive to support, interdependence. So kids with FASD or even young adults, we talk about their act-like age, and we're going to talk about that more. But basically, my 20-year-old son, on any given day, acts like a 10-year-old. So he's going to need help. Like, he's learning to drive, and he's been practicing driving for a couple of years, actually since the COVID. We did the home study driver's test, and then he's got his permit, and he's been practicing learning to drive since then. So it's a lot about framing a teamwork for these individuals so they can be successful, but they still get the help they need and the support they need. Because without that help and support, it could be really scary for them, you know. And then the last characteristic they found in this study is the capacity for human connection. They really do want to be connected individuals. So those are the strengths that I wanted to talk about. And then this list is more of like characteristics. They're creative, they're artistic, they can be musical, mechanically inclined, they're friendly, they're good with animals almost always, they're good with younger children, they can be very determined, and they really do want to please. I mean, my son wants what he wants, but he really doesn't want me to be unhappy about it. He would really prefer we're on the same page with that. So, so then we can move on, but we want to look at both. You know, we want to look at the negatives and the positives. It's and. And so the primary characteristics of FASD: memory problems, developmental dysmaturity. They may have sensory issues and different responses to stimuli. They may have a slow cognitive or auditory pace. They have difficulty abstracting and predicting. They are often very literal and concrete. They are contextual learners. They may have difficulty making decisions, and they most certainly may have difficulties transitioning. Transitioning was always a big one for us. But I just want to give you a couple of examples. They're often very literal and concrete. I have this manger scene, nativity scene, and it just has a lot of sentimental value to me. And of course, the pieces are all breakable. You know, got them before the baby. So I have this very meaningful, breakable nativity set, and I would always set it up every year. And I have, you know, like little baby Jesus right here, and Mary and Joseph here, and then the angel standing here looking for the people to come, and the shepherds are over here watching for the people to come, and we're all presenting this beautiful portrait, and so anyone could come up and take their picture. Every year I would set it up, and then my son would come along and he would turn all the people like this. I'm like, what on earth are you doing? And he's like, oh, they want to see baby Jesus. Concrete thinkers. So and so, you know, now that's just how we set it up. But it takes a while for the kids to learn to talk. And then it takes a while for them to learn to express whatever it is that they mean. Like I remember when he was very young, he had a lot of sensory things, but these kids can't tell you that when they can't speak. So I would give him an ice cream cone. Every time I gave him the ice cream cone, he'd grab it like this, turn it like this, and take a bite right out of the middle of the cone. I was like, what on earth are you doing? And I'm the problem because it took me so many years to just get a bowl of ice cream. You know, it's just so there is a lot of things we can do for these kids, and most of the things are things I could have done differently.
Real quick, I want to chime in. So on the previous slide where it was talking about FASD/neurobehavioral, what we really, really want to be clear on, because some of you in here may be like, well, I don't have an FASDer, or I don't have a kid that I know for sure was exposed to alcohol, so this doesn't apply to me. What we want to be clear on is that a lot of this information will apply to any of your kiddos. So when we're looking at neurobehavioral, all we're saying is that something going on in the brain, so the neuro piece, is affecting their behaviors. So I just want to be really, really clear on that. Many of the next slide, many of those primary characteristics, many of you probably have seen with your kids. Difficulty transitioning, right? Like they're playing a stinking video game and now it's time for dinner, and a war has erupted because they are not getting off that video game. So I just wanted to make sure to throw that in there. Again, these are specific to FASD, but many of you are seeing these with diagnoses of ADHD or autism, or maybe no diagnosis at all.
Or especially trauma, you know. So many of the kids have been through so much trauma before they make it to you. Difficulty abstracting and predicting. Difficulty abstracting and predicting. We'll talk about this more later, but what this means is if you give the child a consequence, and sometimes we have to, the law, there's consequences. I cannot do anything about that. But that consequence is not going to be a way for the child to learn to never do that again. Because especially with FASD, it's brain damage. The brain is developing the whole time that the baby's in the tummy, and whatever the birth mother's drinking can be affected. And so often there's the membrane that connects both hemispheres of the brain. That is usually damaged in the kids with FASD, and that's why they're so impulsive. They might know the rules on one side of the brain, but the membrane to tell the other side of the brain is probably not there or maybe damaged. And so they know the rule, but they can't stop themselves in time to remember the rule. So impulsiveness is just one of those hallmark features. Okay, that's that. So the next slide, sensory defensive behaviors. It just looks so much bigger. Okay, so I'm going to give an example about myself, actually. I worked for a little while. So I worked in addiction and recovery for quite a while. And then I worked a little while at a bail bonds office. And the job at the bail bonds office was to talk to the people in jail. And they are just not, happy, usually. Most of them are not. And often there was some yelling and almost always lying. And I could do that job. And I did do that job. And I enjoyed that job because I do really like helping people. But I did find that my language was very colorful. And I just had very little left over to be nice to my family. I could not be nice to my family. So I was putting myself in an environment that over time was a really poor fit. And this is what we see with the kids with school. They go to school, they hold themselves together. They've been told they're supposed to be in this grade. They may have learning disabilities that no one knows about. And then the stress of being in that environment where they can't keep up, they come home and they melt down for you. So that's where we see a lot of the secondary defense behaviors. Or if they go back to visit their biological families, you'll definitely see some changes when they go visit and then they come back. I even think of my biological family. My mom's house was loud. It was hot. It was smoky. My dad would watch the TV, and this was before hearing aids, so it was super loud, and he'd only watch cops. And it was just not a safe, that's just like for someone with sensory processing, and we think of the nervous system and calming their nervous system. That is never going to happen in my mom's house. So I knew if I let my son stay there for while I went to the movie, I was getting back a very triggered child. So that's something to consider. Secondary behavioral symptoms. So how this might come out is you might have a fearful or withdrawn child. That usually comes at me as anger. They could be depressed, which I get a lot of anger. They could get frustrated, have a short fuse, or actually be angry. They could be anxious, lonely. They do shut down, but it's not the way I envision it, my son anyway. I kind of envision someone just being quiet. No. I mean, they shut down, but it's kind of like they stop. Like, we're done. We're not doing anything else. We're done. And easily tired. They don't have the stamina. Even like working in the yard and helping me, I can outwork my son any day of the week, even when I would have COVID. He does not have the stamina to be a hard worker. And this is especially true for activities like math. Math is often hard for kids who have been exposed to alcohol. Okay. Any questions so far? I pulled my phone out. What time is it?
We're at 7:14.
Okay. All right. I'm going to take a quick little break if we can. Can everybody please stand up?
This is to keep you guys awake.
Stand up. You had those potatoes, you had the rolls, you had the chicken. All right, so let's walk around. We're walking
Do
and
the
we're
hokey
walking.
pokey and turn yourself around. That's
right.
what it's all about.
So we're going to be moving into the solutions here shortly. But one of the things that's really good is to get the kids moving and get them outside if you can. But even when we're moving, another good thing to think about is like cross body exercises. You want to cross that midline. But really, I'm just trying to get you to stand up and stretch. I usually can segue it in better, but that's the purpose. But it is important, you know, like if these kids are sitting there watching TV for hours on end, you know, when I have to sit and look at the computer for hours, I just am kind of in a fog and I'm not nice. So, all right, you can take a seat if you want, or you can keep standing. Okay, so this next picture, no wonder he's anxious and depressed. This is not something I drew, but if I were to draw a picture of our house at any given time, I think this is how my son feels. I try to be very calm and quiet with him. Like if the house were on fire, I would say, "Hey, bud, could you please go grab one of the cats and we're just going to walk outside and go next door to John and Karen's because the house is on fire." And that's how I would try to propose things to him. My husband, however, is like, "Hey man, let's go get ice cream." But he's really loud and he claps a lot. So he's more like, "Gosh, I'm going to kill you." We also have a saying in our house, and that's your honor, is why I killed him. Because these loud noises right at them, you know, when we talk about sensory, my son hears incredibly well. We call it Vulcan hearing. So back on the page where it talked about sensory, they may experience things differently. They can have extra loud hearing. They can smell things from miles away. And so what usually happens is I'll say, "Hey, Alex, can you go to your room and get your shoes?" And then my husband's like, "Yeah, man, go get your shoes. Go to your room. Go get your shoes." So it's the ganging up. And that can really make them feel overwhelmed and anxious. So we know that a lot of times one step direction, until they really prove they can master 2 steps at a time. But even from one person at a time, that's helpful. So we're going to do a little activity on the next slide. What you see isn't what you get. Okay, so we got a picture of my son. He's 16 in the picture. And his expressive language is about 20. And then his actual age is 16. His reading ability is around 14. His money and time concepts are about age 11. His living skills, about a solid 8. You know, flushing the toilet, we haven't mastered that one yet. Or washing. COVID, I think, helped us really solidify the washing of hands. Social skills, about a 7, and comprehensive and social maturity is around 6. Okay? And then, do we have small kids left in the room? No. All right, so he's 20. He's a boy. What happens to boys when they're 20? It's the peak of sexual maturity, I think. I'm not a boy, but I think that's what they told us in health class. So I've got this 20-year-old boy whose biology does not care one bit about my values on premarital sex. They just don't. And so we have an activity. I'm going to turn it over to Carissa.
We do. Okay, so all of you should have just a sheet that's kind of by itself where there's a few questions on it. I was thinking what we can do just for time purposes, just because I know we still have some slides left and I know we want to get out of here on time. We can talk about these just as a group. All right, so in looking at Alex, obviously picture of him, you know, he looks probably like his stated age. We know expressively he's like a 20-year-old. So how do you guys think, based on his profile, do you think that people would expect more of him than he can do? Okay. What kind of problems do you think would occur for him if he was babysitting or having a job with same-aged peers? You guys can call out or however you want to do it. What do you think? He has a job with same-age peers based off of his profile, especially I would say looking at his social skills, his comprehension and social maturity, his living skills. How do you think he would do? Okay, picked on? Okay, taken advantage of? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I'm thinking about him obviously in the care of other children. Frightening, right? Because he could possibly developmentally be much younger than these children that he's caring for. All right. What would be some accommodations that could be set up to support him in playing with his friends? What do you guys think? So he's 16, but socially, right, is 6, 7? Okay.
Yeah, they do it at our house. That's exactly right.
Okay. Anything else you guys can think of?
He said the play dates are at our house. Walk
Okay.
through scenarios.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, very
Awesome.
good.
Some role playing type stuff. Okay. What else?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Normally we do tons of these, but what we really, really want to point out, and again, this will apply to any kiddo in here. So don't just think FASD in your brain. Any one of our kids, we could break this down. So like I have a 13-year-old daughter, expressively, she's probably like a 17-year-old. Living skills, like a 9-year-old. Social skills, she thinks like a 16-year-old. I would say probably more like a 10-year-old, right? So I would encourage all of you when you're thinking about your kiddos to really get into the mindset of their actual age, so their chronological age, and then where they're at developmentally in different areas. Because 9 times out of 10, what we're expecting of our kids is not in line with where they're at developmentally.
So Alex is 20. Alex got a job with vocational rehab, and they found a job where he could work in a car shop after school, 2 hours a day. Though one of the workers was a woman who's 37. She took him for a test drive in a car, kissed him, and told him she wanted to have sex with him. And I thought that 20 was old enough to go out, and I thought it's vocational rehab. It's a protected environment. He's 20. I thought he was old enough. So it's it's really constantly fostering a system, no matter how old the kids are. You know, I was not exposed to alcohol as a baby. I don't think. I'm pretty sure I wasn't. I know my brothers weren't, but I had some trauma in my childhood. So, you know, you hear of adult children of alcoholics. So, an adult child. So, even like for myself, I acted much younger than my age. There can be lots of reasons why these kids act younger. But we really want to foster protecting them. Okay, so what strategies are you using in the home to change behavior? I have one very simple, 100% effective way to change behavior. You'll want to write this down. I change my behavior.
Yep.
I change my expectations daily. I'm always having to remember. It's hard, and that's where the work comes in. It's hard to remember, oh, he can't do this. It's hard to remember, can't versus won't. Kids want to do well. I can change how I speak to him. So we talked about processing speed. And one time there was a spider in our porch, and I wanted the spider to be dead. And I did not want the spider in the house. And I was saying a lot of words really fast and really loud with great emotion. And however I was saying the words, he was hearing, just let it inside. So we're late for school, and there's this spider, and I don't want it in the house, and he keeps trying to let it inside. So, like, on good days, I do speak much slower, and I really do try to use my words wisely. Um, and I expect that I have to remind him over and over. So, like, he will not wash his hair every day. I have finally come to accept this. So now, just periodically, every third or fourth day, I'm like, hey, man, could we just really do a good job with that shampoo tonight? But other caregivers, which comes first for girls, conditioner or shampoo. So they finally wrote numbers on the bottle. Use this first, use that second. So the memory problems show up.
All right, so for you guys, and then we'll go to the next slide. What are some of the strategies that you guys are using in your homes?
I know we've got some seasoned parents out there who have been around the block with this.
So what are you guys using? Kiddos aren't listening. What are you guys doing? What are you guys using? Taking things away. Okay. No electronics. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So like sticker charts, or anyone use any of that, sticker charts, or like some sort of like token economy type systems? Okay. Mhm. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. You're going to have to listen to me again. So, we want to be clear that we are in no way saying, don't ever use timeout, don't ever do consequences, don't talk or lecture. But what we are encouraging is, again, remembering your kiddo's brain, remembering, the previous slides where we were talking about executive functioning, where we were talking about some of those key areas that our kiddos can struggle, and then ask yourself, is what you were putting into place to change behaviors, is it in line with what their brain can comprehend, right? So sometimes, for instance, we may want our kiddo to sit in timeout. Cool, no issue with that. The challenge is, though, what steps does the brain have to take in order to sit in timeout? There's a lot involved, right? They not only have to sit still, they may be distracted by all the things going on in the home or the classroom. The same with lecturing. I love that you do that. I do that with my kids as well. But for some kiddos, they may not even be able to comprehend half of what we're saying. So again, really just being mindful of the strategies that you're putting into place. Can your kiddo's brain and where their brain is at, does it fit what they need?
So I'd like to just add a couple of things on that slide. My son, I call him Vapey Vaperson. He likes to vape, so he has sensory issues, oral fixation. So vaping is very soothing. And my mom died from lung cancer, so I am kind of anti-vape. And so he will just go out on walks. We can all be together. He's so sneaky. He'll pick the vapes up off the ground, dirty vapes, and take them home and puff his little heart out. And so, we've gone round and round and round. We've had a smoking tree across the school. Like, nothing works. And so harm reduction with this, I found this thing called FOOM. And there's not a heating component with the vape. And it doesn't have any nicotine, but he can puff on it, and it's got like a mint scent. So that's a compromise because, I don't want him to vape, but also it's worse for him to pick these things up off the ground. So it's really challenging my ideas and supporting him as an individual, not the parenting I thought I was signing up for, but the parenting I'm in. So harm reduction might be something you would look at for some of these things. Catch them being good. That's really powerful. Like he was saying, positive reinforcement. And then sometimes he's just melting down or he's picking a fight with me. And so I have a few phrases to get out of that. I can say, you might be right. And then in my head, of course you're not, but you might be. And then I also say, let me give that some thought. Sometimes I get really mad and I start in, but I'm able to catch myself and I just stop. And then he'll, Mom, what were you going to say? And I'll say, oh, I forgot. And he believes it. So at least I don't cause more harm. I do have to take things away, like roadblocks. Oh my gosh, I hate that game. And he's he's bullying strangers on roadblocks, and I get the alerts on my phone, and I can shut it off. Oh, the Bark phone. For those of you with kids with a phone, Bark. It's a really neat program. They send you a phone, and it's got parent controls. It's just one of the options, but so I can stop him roadblocks on my phone. And then I'll say, instead of saying no, because no really sets them off by and large, probably all kids, but definitely these kids, I can say, instead of saying no, we'll try again later. We'll try again tomorrow. Like try to say things positively. And then I can just pause. I had to work a lot on pausing before I speak. So I practiced that for a good couple of years. But those are just some tricks I have.
All right, so the next few slides, we may rush through a little bit just because I know we're dwindling down on time, but you guys do have the PowerPoints, and I believe they are going to be sending stuff via email as well. And as I already indicated, if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that accommodations for FASDers, neurobehavioral, whatever we want to call it, right? Any alphabet we can include on there. Accommodations for individuals with physical disabilities are not uncommon, right? Whether it's a wheelchair, cochlear implants, glasses, but for individuals with an FASD or any neurobehavioral type things going on, those accommodations are not as common.
I did want to add, so these accommodations, you can look back through them. You'll see that writing things down is really important. Also, we don't have on the list, be fun. If you can be fun at all, if you're remotely funny, so like I'll sing a lot of times, even now, when he's 20, just to like pull him out of whatever. When he was really little, he'd be melting down at the grocery store. I'd pick him up upside down and carry him out of the store upside down. So if you have a sense of humor, try to use that to be playful. That could be a magic weapon.
Absolutely. And then one of the key things we want you guys to remember is that whatever accommodations you come up with, whether it's for the home, whether you're suggesting things for the church setting, school setting, try to utilize their strengths. So, if your kiddo really enjoys one-on-one time, try to utilize one-on-one time with you as much as possible to get your child to do things. Here's some other ones though. So be concrete of what specifically they need to do. I know I am very guilty, even with my kids, of saying, make your bed. And every day I go in my son's room in particular, and he has made his bed. But it does not look like he has made his bed. The pillows are kind of under, the comforter's been pulled up. So now what I've learned to do is be more specific with what I want. Or I may even, show him a picture of what I expect for a made bed so that I can show him that. Same with clean your room. I have found for many kids, you telling them to clean their room, and then you come in and their room hasn't been clean. That may be too abstract for them. They may need to know specifically what you want them to clean. So do you want them to vacuum the floor? Do you want them to organize their books? Being more specific is going to be really, really important. Writing or verbally stating the steps for each task required. Oftentimes, kiddos with anything brain-based, and again, whether it's because of trauma, substance exposure, whatever it may be, 2 and 3 and 4 step task, they just cannot comprehend that. So trying to just keep it as simple as possible, one task at a time. Creating an environment that meets their needs. Oftentimes we may create these beautiful classrooms or bedrooms for our kids, but it may actually be totally overwhelming for them. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I will say, though, in reference to that, and again, this is something that I've encouraged of all the families I work with, and I've also had to remind myself as a mama. Sometimes they may have a really great day where they do something really well, and the next day, for whatever reason, they just can't do it. And it's really, really frustrating because, again, as parents, as caregivers, as teachers, as, fill in the role, it's like, well, Johnny, you just did this yesterday, or you just did this last week. Like, what the heck? It's remembering, though, sometimes that inconsistency truly is not that they're refusing to do it. It's not willful. It's just for whatever reason, their brain that day is just not firing the way we want it to. So I agree with you, but also just remember, sometimes what they did yesterday, they may not be able to do today. All right. This is very, very lengthy, so this is going to be obviously predominantly for you guys to read. But in our world, it's really all about parent focus versus expecting the child to change. And again, it's not to say that your kiddo cannot make changes. It's not to say that we do not believe in individual therapy for kids, because we absolutely do. And we have kids in individual therapy. But as Pam indicated, it oftentimes is what we need to change as caregivers, that we need to change our perspective, that we need to get a whole lot of patience, a whole lot of prayer, a whole lot of woosahs sometimes to really kind of keep ourselves centered. Unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, we really are the ones that are the impetus of change.
Can I add something?
Yes.
So just a couple of quick takeaways. I keep thinking of connection, connecting. So Alex has always, when we brought him home from the orphanage, he slept in our room for 6 months. Like, we all slept on the floor on a mattress for the first week, and then he was in our room at the foot of the bed, and then he slept in our room forever, like forever. I think he was 10, and we're finally like, okay, you got to go to your own room. But even now, if he's upset about something, he'll sleep in our room. So an accommodation we make is he brings in the twin mattress from the spare bed and puts it on the floor and sleeps in our room. Another accommodation we do for him is he has a girlfriend, and she is 17 and he is 20, and I do not want grandbabies right now. And so we take them on supervised dates, like what she mentioned, the group outings. So it's supervision and partnering, and just finding their strengths. Another thing that he does is he'll like to cook, and so like he'll pull the things out of the freezer. So I buy more things that aren't necessarily healthy, but he'll fix them himself. So he'll pull we left him at home, which we don't often do, for about an hour. We came home and he had cooked a whole bag of meatballs for himself in the air fryer. And like, how can you not be proud about that? And I think he ate the whole bag. So, yes, those are just things I want to add. But loving supervision and support, that's always got us farther than anything else.
How many of you have taken TBRI? Okay, I figured. So you guys obviously know connection is extremely important. We talked a lot about, shifting perspective and us being the impetus of change. And obviously that all stands true. But that relationship that you have and loving your kiddos is so important and is key. So I wanted to just reiterate that as well.
Oh, and also you need to know I am not a saint. I blow it. And when I blow it, it's bad. It's so bad. But I have that connection with him, and it's easier to repair. And now we can laugh about the ways I've blown it. There was an incident with a crosswalk where he almost got hit by a car, and I said really bad things, and now we joke about it. But the connection's so important. Like put a little money in the bank for when you blow it.
So I just wanted to include this, and obviously you all can read it, but I really want to read it just because I really liked it. So parents who have children with special needs also have special needs. They need to know more than the average parent. They need to do more than the average parent. They need more patience than the average parent, and so much more. So I just really wanted to acknowledge that for all of you. I know that whether you're an adoptive parent, a foster parent, biological parent, all of the above, it is a lot to be a parent, and especially to be a parent to kiddos that have come from hard places. So I just really, really wanted to acknowledge that, and thank you for all that you all do for kiddos that very much so need it. Thank you for having us. There's, I believe, some additional slides that we maybe did not get to go over. We also did give all of you, okay. We also did give you guys some FASD tips for behaviors. I would encourage you guys to look those over. And again, remove the FASD and just kind of apply it just to anything brain-based. And honestly, I apply brain-based thinking to everyone now. So if somebody cuts me off in traffic, I try to think to myself like, oh, what's going on with their brain? Like, where's their brain functioning? So for me, it's just a really great way of just reframing my interactions with everyone. Here's some different things that the Florida Center can do. Obviously, we do have the fetal alcohol clinic. We do evaluations there. We are now doing adult evaluations as well. So you can always reach out to us if you have a kiddo that you think needs an evaluation, if you have questions. As Pam indicated earlier, we really do prefer that there's confirmed alcohol exposure. However, there are times that we still do evaluate even if there's not necessarily confirmed exposure. If it's highly suspected and we're able to see that they have the key FAS facial features. I know we didn't talk about those today, but there are definitely times that we don't necessarily have the confirmed exposure, but we can still evaluate. We have support groups. We have a Wednesday morning support group via Zoom every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30. We also have a Facebook page. There's just lots of different ways that we offer support. And yes, I think you had a question. Yeah, so what I always recommend is reach out to us. I mean, Pam and I constantly, she's like, all right, Krista, I got this referral. What do you think? And we go back and forth. So I always just say reach out. It never hurts to ask. And again, 9 times out of 10, there was alcohol exposure. And so sometimes when we dig a little bit more, we can end up finding out more information and we can get that confirmation. Or sometimes I've even had families send me pictures. And I have this really cool facial analysis software, and I can upload them into there, and I can say, oh my goodness gracious, like they have the facial features that you will only have if you had alcohol exposure in utero. Mm-hmm. It is fascinating. I agree.
So, and for confirmed exposure, it's not like you have to be sitting down at dinner with the birth mother
Yeah.
and she's visibly pregnant and drinking a beer. It's just someone has to know there was at least one beer consumed during the pregnancy. And even before she found out she was pregnant.
Mm-hmm. So this just goes over a little bit about how to connect families to us. So that's in you guys' slides. And then here's some of the upcoming trainings. We did include the QR code. We did also include the discount codes. I will note that there is one tomorrow that I will actually be participating in because I thought it sounded really good. So that's the How to Talk to Neurodivergent Kids About Personal Safety. There's the IEP one, just lots of really, really great trainings. And many of them have nothing to do with FASD. So if you're like, oh my goodness, like I am so FASD'd out, there's lots of really great ones. And as I indicated, many of them are free or highly, highly reduced. All right, so does anyone have any questions? Any questions, any comments? Gosh, you guys were an easy bunch.
So, you all seem like pretty well adjusted to this FASD, foster, drug exposed, adoptive lifestyle. Seem to roll pretty easy. But if in case your journey wasn't as smooth, or your journey is not as smooth, it was more like mine. One thing we did is like we would lay in bed at night, especially when things were really hard. Because around 3 to 6, that's a hard age. And I'd write down like my favorite Alex moment of the day. And there are seasons, and I would say it definitely does get better. And dear God, I hope it does for you if you're in a season.
Mm-hmm. So I always say the sooner the better, honestly. I mean, we have, my goodness, I think a few weeks ago, we had like a 9-month-old in the clinic. I mean, we start very, very early. And the earlier you start, the earlier you kind of start to get answers. And then, then you come back and you're reevaluated in a year or two, and then you kind of see where they're at. So I say the earlier, the better for getting evaluated, whatever that may be, even if it's not in the FASD world, because it's good to know what you're dealing with so that we can make sure we're dealing with it in the best way possible. Obviously, every kid is different. I know even with my son, no substance exposure, no trauma other than, me being a new mom and not knowing what I was doing. But he did things on his own time. He didn't walk till he was almost 2 years old. So there are certain things I think developmentally with kids that there's a range, right? And typically once they're not doing something by a certain time, they're concerned and they refer and they do all of those things. But if there's known substance exposure, I would definitely recommend beginning that evaluation process. I find oftentimes behaviors in those types of things, the big behaviors, if you will, oftentimes don't start manifesting until they're 3, 4, 5. So right now, your kiddo may just be super, super cute and, maybe have some delays, if you will, here and there in some of the milestones. But some of the big behaviors you're not necessarily going to see until they're a little older. Yeah. Yeah.
Is the baby
And I do want to say, and then I know Pam wants to say something. I do always want to say as well, when I say big behaviors, again, every kiddo is different. I've worked with many kids that were exposed to a multitude of substances, had tons of trauma, multiple placements, never had big behaviors. So I always want to be clear, there may or may not be big behaviors, right? I don't want to scare anyone into thinking, oh my goodness, what am I signing up for? You don't know, right? Bio kids, we don't know what we're signing up for. I mean, they could come out and we're like, oh gosh, please, please, can I have another one? Go ahead, Pam.
does the baby sleep?
Okay.
Well, that's good. Twins can be affected differently. They can 100%. There's definite studies on twins and the effects of alcohol. So,
And they're very fascinating. We actually not long ago had some twins through clinic, and one of them, and again, maybe it was just the way metabolism worked, whatever, but like one of them had facial features, one of them did not have facial features, and so it's fascinating. I mean, obviously, it's extremely sad, but it's also fascinating from a scientific perspective how that works. So, mhm.
I went through a lot of doctors. Yeah, you know more than the doctors do. If you're in Sarasota, I know a couple of good doctors.
Yeah. And obviously, I always recommend developmental pediatricians as much as possible, just because they tend to be a little bit more versed, if you will, with FASD and just neurobehavioral disorders. And again, it's not dissing on any of our pediatricians. We have great pediatricians, but developmental pediatricians I find tend to be a little bit more versed.
And we do have a spreadsheet of providers that are FASD informed or educated. And so if you email Krissa, she can get you in contact with Crystal, who has that list. But it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, we've had many that actually that's how they got the confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had several through like the CBHA, where maybe the CBHA indicated like, oh, case manager went out to visit mom, and mom was pregnant, and mom was actively drinking. So I mean, there are definite ways that you can find out. It is challenging when you don't have that definitive confirmation. It's like that it happened, but you don't have it definitively. It can be frustrating. But again, the way I look at it is that if we're providing the supports and services as if they were alcohol exposed, they're getting the supports and services. It's not going to hurt them. I think there was a question. Oh,
Yes. You'll need, yeah. So those clinics are like every 3 to 5 years. It's like it before, but no harm, no harm. But it's like per each new like phase in life, so to speak. So we recommend them every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. I will also say, yes, you can, and that's included in there. I will also say, so specific to our clinic, when they're under 3, there's no neuropsychological testing done. So there's no IQ testing done. When they're 3 and above, they actually get IQ testing done. So if you had them in when they were 2, they didn't have that whole piece of it. It's also super helpful to just see over time, where they were at this age and where they're at now. We take all new photos. So it's a very comprehensive process. They get a speech therapy evaluation, an occupational therapy evaluation, and then the neuropsych testing if they're 3 and above. Yes. There is. Now, I'm not going to quote it, so don't ask me. And I know you have that look like you're going to ask. Okay. Hey, Pam, will you help me remember that? He wants information on the correlation of Okay. Okay. It's in there. It's in there, so email me. Perfect. So we are out of time, so I have to stop talking. Mic drop.
Mic drop. I'm going to take it. Is it on? Okay. All right, that was great. Thank you guys. Some good questions. And I'm sending out this deck that has both of their email addresses in there. So if you have more questions, you can ask them. Any of those, it's all already in your inbox if you registered, which I believe everyone here did register. If you didn't, email me and I will get it to you. A couple closing announcements. There are some gifts left in the back. Feel free. Please take them home. We don't want to. Please take them. And then there's a little bit of food left. Everybody did a great job today on that. We just ask that if you're going to like mingle a little bit, you get your kids and then mingle so our volunteers can go. But we appreciate everyone being here tonight, and thank you. And again, and if you have a certificate in the back, Teresa from Parenting Matters has those for you back there, so make sure you pick that up on your way out. Thanks, guys.